Synod of Synodality has begun, and these first days it is taking place in the midst of a complete informative silence as requested by the Pope. We will see what happens later, but the Synod was preceded by a certain storm. A group of 5 cardinals presented some questions to the doctrine of faith, some questions, some doubts. The Dubia, the word is in Latin. These questions have been answered by the Pope with a signature of the prefect of the doctrine of the faith, but they have not satisfied those who asked them, who have again restated their questions, so far unanswered. And there has also been another cardinal, the Archbishop Emeritus of Prague, Cardinal Dubia, who again submitted his own question that has been answered as the previous one. We do not know if there will be a counter question by Cardinal Dubia. On the very day the Synod was inaugurated, the Pope published an apostolic exhortation, Laudate Deum, on the ecological question, in which he says that the climate change we are suffering is serious, very serious. It is already upon us, and that's something that must be done urgently. But above all, he says that human action has a lot to do with this climate change, that it is not just one more case of all of those that the earth has suffered throughout its history. Man is responsible, at least in part, according to the Pope, for this climate change. Well, as a result of all of these that are happening, I too have some dubia, some doubts, some questions, which I would like to expose, and which of course I have no pretension that anyone should answer them. They are not addressed to a specific person, and I have no right even to have them answered. But I confess that many times they make me suffer, and I am also convinced that I am not the only priest who has asked himself these questions, who has these doubts, and who has these fears. Let's go for the first one. It is said that the divorced and remarried without having obtained the nullity and without living in sexual abstinence, that the divorced and remarried will be able to receive communion if they, in conscience, making their discernment theoretically with a priest, in practice most of them in no way, if they in conscience decide that they can receive communion. Well, according to their discernment, according to their conscience, they can receive communion. And here comes my question. If the priest does not agree, and if the priest is convinced in conscience that there are not sufficient reasons for that couple, that marriage, or one of them to be able to receive communion, will the priest be obliged to give communion against his conscience? And therefore, if for the priest to give communion implies participating in a sacrilege, will be he obliged to participate in that sacrilege? Does the priest have the right to make his own discernment? Does the priest have the right to have a conscience? The layman is given the right to discern and the right to act according to his conscience. It is the priest given the right to discernment and the right to act according to his own conscience. And if it were admitted that the individual priest can refuse to give communion, would the parish be obliged to have someone give communion to these persons, even if the pastor does not want to? I give an example, and I think it is an example that may not seem appropriate to some, but it does to me. Imagine a doctor who does not want to participate in an abortion. The Church has always defended that the conscientious objection of the doctor must be respected. Are we priests less than the doctors when for us the Eucharist is, as it should be for every Catholic, for us that it is something vital? With our life we have to be ready to defend the Eucharist? If a doctor's conscientious objection is respected, shouldn't a priest's right to conscientious objection not participate in something that he considers a sacrilege be respected? And if it's requested, if the Church requests it, that a Catholic hospital can also make conscientious objection and not perform abortions in them, and that not only the doctor can refuse, but also the hospital can refuse, should not the same be requested and this conscientious objection be allowed to the equivalent of the hospital, which would be the parish? First dubia, first doubt. Second one, linked to the first. What is about the rest of the regular couples? the couples who live together without getting married, the homosexual or heterosexual couples who live together and have marital relations and who decide according to their own conscience that they can receive communion at any time, on a special day, or every Sunday. They decide, making use of their discernment, that it is not a sin for them and that they can receive communion. If the priest knows, if you do not know, you cannot refuse because you do not know the situation of the one who comes to receive communion. But if the priest knows and is aware, is he obliged to give communion to people that he knows in his conscience that he knows that they are in mortal sin? Is the priest obliged to participate in a sacrilege? And if the priest refuses, what will happen to him? Punishment by his superiors, reduction even to the lay state, or at least suspension ad divinis? The priest who refuses to give communion to an unmarried cohabitating couple, will that priest be punished? Will this be the case? We will not have, I repeat, the right to conscientious objection. We will not have the right to have a conscience. We will not have the right to be able to discern. Blessing of homosexual or heterosexual couples who live together without marriage. Not communion, but blessing. If the church were to allow such a blessing to unmarried cohabitating couples, and the priest could not in a conscience give such a blessing because he considers that the person can be blessed, but the one cannot bless a state and the situation for which the priest and the church up to now is a sin, could the priest refute the blessing? Or would he be punished if he refused? More dubia. Let us imagine that the female diaconate is accepted. I'm not saying that it will happen in the synod. In the synod, I have already said it several times. I do not think that anything will be approved because it's first part of a 2-year synod. I could be wrong, but this is my opinion. But if the day comes when the female diaconate is approved, and later, of course, the female priesthood, could the priest refuse to concelebrate with a diaconess, or to have that diaconess concelebrate in his parish? Because he considers that following the tradition of the church, the priesthood or the female diaconate, which is the first degree of the priesthood, cannot be given to a woman. Would the priest who refused to do so and who refused to have diaconess in his parish be punished? Yet another dubia. It is said that conclusions of a synod are going to become ordinary magisterium. Therefore, with the permission, the approval of the Pope, or even without the approval of the Pope, therefore what a synod concludes will be ordinary magisterium, and it will have to be fulfilled. Well, a synod is not a council where all the bishops participate, but some bishops participate as representatives of their episcopal conferences, and then people appointed by the Pope according to the Pope's criteria, that is to say, the Pope decides more water of this type with this color should be added to the whole, and he does it. It is his freedom and his right, but it is not representative organism of the whole church, or at least it is not representative of the whole episcopate, as the council is. If a synod were to approve something, and that was to be ordinary magisterium, that had to be applied to daily life, could the priest, making use of his discernment, making use of his freedom, he has to be faithful to his conscience, could he refuse, or would he necessarily have to apply it? And if they were to happen with the synod, would it be the same, for example, with pastoral councils? What was approved in the pastoral councils, would the priest have to apply it, even if he did not agree? For example, if he was forced in a pastoral council to present his homily in writing in order to censure those things that the group of lay people in charge did not like, would the priest have to submit his homily beforehand to control of the laity? There could be cases in which the laity are conservative and the priest is not, but as we have seen so far, the opposite is more likely to be the case. Well, these are my dubia. I have more, but I think that for today it is enough. I repeat, I do them without the intention of disturbing, only to expose something that worries me, that's something that torments me, and that I'm convinced that not only worries me, but there are many priests who are also worried, and so the laity can understand what many priests are going through, the doubts we have, the suffering we have. But tomorrow, Saturday, is Our Lady of the Rosary, so in a special way, I always end up asking for prayers. But today, in a special way, I want to ask everyone that tomorrow, Rosary Day, tomorrow, Saturday, we pray this prayer that she likes so much, that we ask the Blessed Virgin with humility, that we ask her to intercede, to intervene before the Father of the Church, that we can get out of this situation of tension and conflict, that the Church can shine again to the light in the midst of the darkness and the salt of the earth, the leaven in the dough. May Our Lady of the Rosary intercede for each and every one of us. Until next week, God willing.